Nelson Mandela stands as one of the most influential figures in modern history, a symbol of resilience, justice, and unwavering commitment to equality. Born into a system entrenched in racial segregation and oppression, Mandela transcended personal hardship to become a global beacon of hope. His life journey, from rural beginnings to global statesmanship, encapsulates the struggle for freedom and the power of reconciliation. This chapter introduces Mandela's life and legacy, establishing the foundation for understanding his profound impact on South Africa and the world. Mandela's story begins in 1918 in the village of Mvizo, South Africa. The son of a local chief, he inherited a sense of leadership and duty to his community. His birth name, Ralilela, translates to pulling the branch of a tree, or more colloquially, troublemaker. This foreshadowed his future role as a disruptor of unjust systems. Growing up under British colonial rule and the emerging apartheid regime, Mandela witnessed firsthand the systemic inequality that defined South African society. These early experiences shaped his commitment to challenging injustice. Central to Mandela's legacy is his leadership in the fight against apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination established by the South African government in 1948. As a young man, Mandela became acutely aware of the devastating impact of apartheid policies on Black South Africans. These policies stripped them of their land, rights, and dignity. Mandela's response was not only personal, but deeply political, as he became a pivotal figure in the African National Congress, ANC, an organization committed to ending apartheid through both legal and revolutionary means. Mandela's dedication to justice was not without immense personal sacrifice. In 1962, he was arrested and later sentenced to life imprisonment for his activism. Spending 27 years behind bars, Mandela became a symbol of resistance for people across the globe. His imprisonment did not silence him, but amplified his voice. The international community rallied around his cause, making Mandela a household name and galvanizing a global movement against apartheid. The turning point came in the early 1990s when, after decades of resistance and international pressure, apartheid began to crumble. Mandela's release from prison in 1990 marked the dawn of a new era for South Africa. As the first Black president of a democratic South Africa, Mandela sought to heal the wounds of a divided nation. His presidency emphasized reconciliation, unity, and the creation of a society where all citizens could live with dignity and equality. Beyond his role as a political leader, Mandela's legacy extends to his philosophy of forgiveness and his commitment to peace. He famously said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies." This attitude transformed him into a global icon of moral courage and humanity. Mandela's actions demonstrated that even the deepest wounds of division and hatred could be healed through understanding and collaboration. Mandela's contributions did not end with his presidency. After stepping down in 1999, he continued to work tirelessly as an advocate for human rights, global peace, and HIV/AIDS awareness. His efforts earned him numerous accolades, including the Nobel Peace Prize, which he shared with former South African President F.W. de Klerk in 1993. Mandela's influence extended far beyond the borders of South Africa, inspiring movements for justice and equality worldwide. While Mandela's life is often celebrated as a triumph, it also serves as a reminder of the ongoing challenges in the pursuit of justice. The fight against inequality, racism, and oppression is far from over. Mandela's story challenges humanity to reflect on its values and to continue striving for a world where freedom and dignity are universal rights. As we delve deeper into Mandela's life in subsequent chapters, we will explore the intricacies of his journey, his early influences, his trials, and his triumphs. Each phase of his life offers valuable insights into the making of a leader who changed the course of history. Mandela's legacy endures as a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and unwavering belief in the human spirit. Nelson Mandela's life was a remarkable journey of transformation, not only for himself, but also for his nation and the world. His story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense adversity, individuals possess the ability to ignite change. Mandela's enduring legacy continues to inspire those who dare to envision a better future and work tirelessly to make it a reality. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the rural village of Mvizo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His early years were shaped by his Xhosa heritage, the tribal traditions of his people, and the complexities of growing up under British colonial rule. Mandela's childhood and formative experiences played a crucial role in shaping his character, instilling in him a deep sense of justice, leadership, and duty to his community. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mfakeni-Iswa, was a chief of the Thembu people, a position that imbued Mandela with a sense of responsibility and connection to traditional leadership. Though his father lost his chieftaincy due to a dispute with colonial authorities, Mandela retained pride in his lineage and respect for his cultural heritage. His mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was a devout Christian, and it was through her influence that Mandela was introduced to Methodist teachings and Western-style education. Mandela's early education was a defining factor in his development. At the age of 7, he attended a local mission school where his teacher gave him the English name Nelson, a common practice in colonial South Africa to conform African children to Western norms. While this name marked the beginning of his exposure to Western culture, Mandela never abandoned his African roots, drawing strength from both his traditional upbringing and the values instilled by his formal education. After his father's death, Mandela was placed under the guardianship of Chief Janjantaba Dalindibo, the acting regent of the Thembu people. Living in the regent's royal residence exposed Mandela to the principles of governance, diplomacy, and leadership. He attended meetings where tribal elders debated and resolved issues, a practice that deeply influenced his understanding of justice and consensus building. This period reinforced Mandela's belief in the importance of listening, fairness, and humility, qualities that would later define his leadership style. Mandela continued his education at Clarkberry Boarding Institute and later Heldtown, a Wesleyan secondary school. At both institutions, he excelled academically and developed a strong sense of discipline and perseverance. However, his exposure to the harsh realities of racial discrimination became increasingly apparent. While his teachers emphasized values like equality and justice, Mandela observed how these ideals were contradicted by the systemic racism that governed South African society. These contradictions fueled his desire to fight for a more equitable world. In 1939, Mandela enrolled at the University of Fort Hare, the only higher education institution for black students in South Africa at the time. Fort Hare was a hub of intellectual and political activity, attracting students from across Southern Africa. Here, Mandela encountered peers and mentors who challenged his thinking and introduced him to the ideas of self-determination and resistance against colonialism. However, his time at Fort Hare was cut short when he was expelled for participating in a student protest, an early sign of his willingness to challenge authority in the name of justice. Following his expulsion, Mandela returned to the regent's household, where he faced pressure to conform to traditional expectations, including an arranged marriage. Refusing to accept a predetermined future, Mandela fled to Johannesburg in 1941, marking a significant turning point in his life. This move not only allowed him to escape the constraints of tradition, but also introduced him to the urban environment where his political consciousness would deepen. In Johannesburg, Mandela worked in various jobs while completing his law degree through correspondence courses. He was exposed to the harsh realities of urban apartheid, including passed laws that restricted the movement of black South Africans and forced them into economic marginalization. These experiences sharpened his awareness of systemic oppression and strengthened his resolve to fight for liberation. Another key influence during this period was Mandela's exposure to political ideologies that shaped his thinking. He became acquainted with members of the African National Congress, ANC, and was introduced to socialist and Marxist ideas, which emphasized the interconnectedness of economic and racial oppression. These interactions solidified his commitment to joining the struggle for justice and equality. Mandela's early life was a blend of traditional values and modern education, rural simplicity and urban complexity, personal hardship and intellectual growth. Each experience, from witnessing tribal governance to encountering systemic racism, laid the foundation for his transformation into a revolutionary leader. These formative years were not merely a prelude to his later activism, but an essential part of his journey, as they provided him with the tools, values, and perspective needed to confront the immense challenges that lay ahead. Nelson Mandela's transition from an ambitious young man to a committed political activist was neither instantaneous nor inevitable. It was a gradual evolution fueled by his growing awareness of systemic injustice, his interactions with diverse ideological influences, and his early exposure to the African National Congress (ANC). This chapter explores Mandela's initial steps into activism, highlighting the experiences and events that led him to dedicate his life to the fight against apartheid. Mandela's arrival in Johannesburg in 1941 marked the beginning of his political awakening. The city's stark inequalities were a manifestation of apartheid policies that subjugated Black South Africans and confined them to a life of poverty and humiliation. Mandela experienced firsthand the indignities of apartheid, from the enforcement of past laws to the lack of basic rights for non-white citizens. This environment planted the seeds of resistance within him, setting the stage for his eventual involvement in organized politics. While working as a clerk at a law firm in Johannesburg, Mandela was introduced to a network of politically active individuals. One of the most influential figures during this time was Walter Sisulu, a prominent member of the ANC and a lifelong mentor to Mandela. Sisulu recognized Mandela's potential and encouraged him to join the ANC, a decision that would define the course of Mandela's life. Sisulu's guidance not only exposed Mandela to the broader anti-apartheid movement, but also deepened his understanding of the structural nature of racial oppression in South Africa. Mandela officially joined the ANC in 1943, at a time when the organization was undergoing significant transformation. Initially focused on petitions and appeals to the government, the ANC was beginning to embrace a more militant approach to fighting apartheid. Mandela quickly became involved in ANC activities, attending rallies, protests, and political discussions. His charisma, eloquence, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life made him a natural leader, earning him respect within the organization. One of Mandela's first significant political acts was his participation in the 1943 Alexandra bus boycott. This protest against rising bus fares demonstrated the power of collective action in challenging apartheid policies. For Mandela, the boycott was an eye-opening experience that revealed the potential of grassroots mobilization. It reinforced his belief in the necessity of uniting ordinary South Africans to resist the oppressive system that governed their lives. In 1944, Mandela became a founding member of the ANC Youth League, ANCYL, alongside other young leaders such as Oliver Tambo and Anton Lembede. The NCYL aimed to inject new energy into the ANC by promoting a more assertive and radical approach to activism. Its members believed that nonviolent resistance, mass mobilization, and African nationalism were the keys to dismantling apartheid. Mandela fully embraced this vision, and his involvement in the Youth League marked a significant turning point in his political career. The NCYL's influence soon began to reshape the ANC's strategies. In 1949, the ANC adopted the Youth League's program of action, which emphasized boycotts, strikes, civil disobedience, and other forms of direct action. Mandela played a pivotal role in organizing these efforts, earning a reputation as a determined and courageous activist. His leadership during the Defiance campaign of the early 1950s, which saw thousands of South Africans openly defy apartheid laws, cemented his status as a key figure in the struggle. Mandela's activism also led him to study political theories and ideologies that shaped his worldview. He was particularly influenced by the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolent resistance resonated with the ANC's evolving strategies. At the same time, Mandela engaged with Marxist and socialist ideas, which emphasized the link between racial and economic oppression. These influences broadened his perspective, helping him develop a nuanced understanding of the interconnected struggles for social and economic justice. Despite the growing momentum of the anti-apartheid movement, Mandela faced significant challenges during this period. The apartheid government responded to protests with brutal repression, passing laws that further curtailed the rights of black South Africans and increasing surveillance of political activists. Mandela himself was frequently arrested and targeted by the state, but these setbacks only strengthened his resolve. He became more convinced that the fight against apartheid required not only mass mobilization, but also a willingness to confront the regime directly. By the mid-1950s, Mandela's activism had become all-consuming. His legal career, which he pursued in partnership with Oliver Tambo at South Africa's first black law firm, became intertwined with his political work. The firm provided legal aid to those affected by apartheid laws, offering Mandela a unique perspective on the human cost of the system he was fighting to dismantle. This combination of professional and political engagement solidified his reputation as both a leader and a symbol of resistance. Mandela's early activism laid the groundwork for his later leadership in the struggle against apartheid. These formative years were marked by his growing commitment to the principles of justice, equality, and collective action. They also revealed the challenges and sacrifices that would come to define his life as a revolutionary leader. As Nelson Mandela's political involvement deepened, so did his transformation from an activist to a revolutionary leader. This chapter explores Mandela's rise within the African National Congress, ANC, his increasing recognition of the limitations of nonviolent resistance, and his eventual decision to embrace armed struggle. It was during this period that Mandela fully emerged as a pivotal figure in the anti-apartheid movement, solidifying his role as a symbol of resistance and hope for millions of oppressed South Africans. The 1950s were a pivotal decade for Mandela and the ANC. Following the adoption of the Youth League's Program of Action in 1949, the ANC embarked on a series of campaigns aimed at directly challenging apartheid policies. One of the most notable was the Defiance Campaign of 1952, which Mandela helped organize and lead. This nationwide movement saw thousands of South Africans deliberately breaking apartheid laws, such as passed laws and segregation rules, as an act of peaceful defiance. Mandela's leadership during the campaign demonstrated his ability to inspire and mobilize people across racial and socioeconomic lines. The Defiance Campaign marked Mandela's emergence as a prominent leader within the ANC. His organizational skills, charisma, and unwavering commitment to justice earned him national recognition. It also brought him to the attention of the apartheid government, which began closely monitoring his activities. Despite the campaign's ultimate failure to dismantle apartheid laws, it succeeded in uniting South Africans in resistance and laying the groundwork for future activism. For Mandela, it reinforced the need for a sustained and multifaceted struggle against apartheid. In 1956, Mandela was arrested along with 155 other activists and charged with treason in what became known as the Treason Trial. The trial, which lasted until 1961, was a deliberate attempt by the apartheid government to undermine the anti-apartheid movement by silencing its leaders. While the trial placed enormous strain on Mandela and his comrades, it also provided a platform to expose the injustices of apartheid to the world. The defendants were eventually acquitted, but the trial highlighted the increasing lengths to which the regime would go to suppress dissent. As the 1950s came to a close, Mandela began to question the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance in the face of escalating state repression. The Sharpeville Massacre of 1960, in which police opened fire on peaceful protesters, killing 69 people and injuring hundreds more, was a turning point. The event shocked South Africa and the international community, demonstrating the apartheid regime's willingness to use extreme violence to maintain its grip on power. For Mandela, it was a moment of reckoning that forced him to reconsider the strategy of the anti-apartheid movement. In response to the Sharpeville Massacre and the subsequent banning of the ANC, Mandela and his colleagues concluded that armed resistance was necessary. In 1961, Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe MK, meaning Spear of the Nation. As the armed wing of the ANC, MK's mission was to carry out acts of sabotage against government infrastructure, with the aim of pressuring the apartheid regime while minimizing loss of life. Mandela became the commander-in-chief of MK, marking a significant shift in his approach to the struggle for liberation. Mandela's decision to embrace armed resistance was not made lightly. He viewed violence as a last resort, taken only after all other avenues of resistance had been exhausted. In his own words, "We chose to adopt armed struggle as a form of political expression only when there was no other way out." The establishment of MK reflected the growing realization that apartheid could not be dismantled through negotiation or peaceful protest alone. It also underscored Mandela's adaptability and willingness to take bold actions in pursuit of justice. In 1962, Mandela embarked on a secret trip across Africa and to London to garner support for the ANC and MK. He sought military training, forged alliances with African liberation movements, and gained an international perspective on the struggle against colonialism and oppression. This journey not only broadened Mandela's strategic thinking, but also strengthened the ANC's global network. His travels underscored the interconnectedness of liberation struggles across the continent and the importance of solidarity in the fight against apartheid. Mandela's activities, however, did not go unnoticed by the apartheid government. Shortly after his return to South Africa in 1962, he was arrested and charged with leaving the country illegally and inciting workers to strike. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but his legal troubles did not end there. In 1963, while already serving his sentence, Mandela was implicated in the Rivonia trial, where he and other MK leaders were accused of plotting acts of sabotage against the state. The Rivonia trial became a defining moment in Mandela's life and in the history of South Africa's liberation struggle. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Mandela delivered a powerful speech from the dock, outlining his vision for a free and democratic South Africa. His words resonated across the world. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Mandela's unwavering resolve and moral clarity solidified his status as a global symbol of resistance. Mandela's transformation during this period was profound. He evolved from a young activist advocating for nonviolent resistance to a revolutionary leader willing to take up arms in the pursuit of justice. This phase of his life highlights his ability to adapt to changing circumstances, his deep commitment to his principles, and his willingness to make personal sacrifices for the greater good. The formation of a revolutionary leader was not merely a response to external pressures, but a testament to Mandela's determination to confront injustice in all its forms. Nelson Mandela's imprisonment marked a pivotal chapter in his life and in the global struggle against apartheid. Arrested in 1962 and sentenced to life imprisonment during the Rivonia trial in 1964, Mandela spent 27 years behind bars. Far from silencing him, his imprisonment transformed him into a symbol of resilience, justice, and the collective yearning for freedom. This chapter examines how Mandela's time in prison shaped his character, strengthened the anti-apartheid movement, and turned him into a global icon of hope and resistance. Mandela began his incarceration at Robben Island, a desolate prison off the coast of Cape Town. Conditions there were harsh. Prisoners were subjected to forced labor, inadequate food, and dehumanizing treatment. Mandela and his fellow political prisoners were placed in isolation from ordinary criminals, underscoring the apartheid regime's fear of their influence. Despite these hardships, Mandela displayed remarkable resilience. He committed himself to self-discipline, intellectual growth, and maintaining a sense of dignity, inspiring those around him. Education became a cornerstone of Mandela's life in prison. Robben Island became known as the University of Robben Island, as prisoners shared knowledge, debated political strategies, and educated one another. Mandela was both a student and a teacher, studying law, history, and political theory while mentoring younger activists. This exchange of ideas not only kept the prisoners' spirits alive, but also strengthened their collective resolve to dismantle apartheid. Mandela's leadership extended beyond the prison walls. Despite being physically removed from the anti-apartheid movement, he continued to influence it from within prison. Through covert communication and the strategic use of visitors, Mandela maintained contact with the ANC and other liberation movements. His steadfast commitment to the cause gave his comrades and supporters hope, even during the darkest days of repression. Mandela became a unifying figure whose name was synonymous with the struggle for justice. The apartheid government recognized Mandela's growing symbolic power and sought to neutralize it through various means. Over the years, officials offered him conditional release in exchange for renouncing violence and abandoning the ANC's armed struggle. Mandela consistently refused, famously stating, "Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts." His steadfastness demonstrated his integrity and his refusal to compromise on the principles of freedom and equality. Meanwhile, Mandela's imprisonment became a rallying point for the global anti-apartheid movement. Activists, governments, and organizations worldwide called for his release and imposed economic sanctions on South Africa. The Free Nelson Mandela campaign gained momentum, with protests, concerts, and public demonstrations amplifying his cause. Mandela's name became synonymous with the broader struggle against apartheid, and his moral authority transcended national boundaries. Mandela's time in prison also deepened his understanding of reconciliation and the complexities of leadership. He interacted with prison guards and other representatives of the apartheid state, learning to see them as individuals rather than faceless oppressors. These interactions contributed to his belief in the importance of dialogue and understanding, even with one's adversaries. This philosophy would later underpin his approach to leading South Africa out of apartheid. After 18 years on Robben Island, Mandela was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in 1982 and later to Victor Verster Prison in 1988. These moves reflected the government's growing recognition of Mandela's symbolic importance and their attempts to manage his influence. At Victor Verster, Mandela experienced slightly improved conditions and began engaging in secret talks with government officials. These discussions marked the beginning of a negotiated transition from apartheid to democracy, with Mandela at the center of this historic process. Mandela's release on February 11, 1990, was a moment of global celebration and a turning point in South Africa's history. Emerging from prison with his fist raised in triumph, Mandela symbolized the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of justice. His 27 years of imprisonment had not diminished his commitment to the cause, but had instead solidified his role as a unifying figure capable of leading South Africa into a new era. Mandela's imprisonment was more than a personal sacrifice. It was a transformative period that elevated him from a leader of a national movement to a global symbol of freedom and dignity. His unwavering commitment to justice, even in the face of extreme adversity, inspired millions and laid the groundwork for the eventual dismantling of apartheid. Nelson Mandela's release from prison in 1990 marked a turning point not only in his life, but in the history of South Africa. Far from being the culmination of his struggle, his release signaled the beginning of a new phase, negotiating the end of apartheid and laying the foundation for a democratic South Africa. This chapter explores Mandela's role as a negotiator, his ability to bridge deep divisions, and the challenges he faced in steering South Africa through a complex and often volatile transition. Mandela's release came at a time of profound uncertainty. South Africa was gripped by economic decline, escalating violence, and growing international pressure to dismantle apartheid. The apartheid regime, under the leadership of President F.W. de Klerk, recognized that the status quo was unsustainable. De Klerk's government initiated a series of reforms, including unbanning the African National Congress, ANC, and other political organizations. But the road to meaningful change was fraught with obstacles. Upon his release, Mandela immediately assumed a central role in negotiations between the apartheid government and the ANC. His approach was characterized by pragmatism, patience, and a commitment to dialogue. Mandela understood that achieving a peaceful transition required engaging with his former oppressors, however unpalatable that might seem to many of his comrades. His ability to maintain focus on the larger goal of national reconciliation was a testament to his leadership and vision. Negotiations formally began in 1991 with the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, a multi-party forum aimed at charting the country's path toward democracy. The talks were tense, with deep mistrust between the parties and frequent disruptions. Hardline factions within both the ANC and the apartheid government sought to derail the process, and violence between political groups escalated, threatening to plunge the country into chaos. Mandela's leadership was crucial in navigating these challenges and keeping the negotiations on track. Mandela's ability to engage with de Klerk, despite their ideological differences and personal tensions, was a cornerstone of the negotiation process. While Mandela respected de Klerk's role in initiating reform, he was critical of the government's continued use of violence and delay tactics. Their relationship was marked by moments of cooperation and conflict, reflecting the complexity of transitioning from a deeply divided society to a shared vision of democracy. Mandela's insistence on fairness and accountability was instrumental in pushing the process forward. One of Mandela's most remarkable qualities during this period was his ability to balance competing demands. Within the ANC, he faced pressure from more radical elements who demanded immediate and uncompromising action against the apartheid regime. At the same time, he had to reassure white South Africans, who feared losing their privileges and facing retribution. Mandela's message of reconciliation and his willingness to compromise were critical in building trust across racial and political divides. In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to end apartheid peacefully. While the award acknowledged their achievements, it also underscored the fragility of the transition. At the time, South Africa was still grappling with political violence, including massacres, assassinations, and intercommunal conflict. Mandela's ability to remain steadfast in his commitment to peace, even in the face of these challenges, was vital to maintaining momentum toward a democratic outcome. The breakthrough came with the adoption of an interim constitution in 1993, which laid the groundwork for South Africa's first democratic elections. The constitution enshrined principles of equality, human rights, and universal suffrage, reflecting the aspirations of a nation long denied these fundamental rights. For Mandela, the interim constitution was more than a legal document. It was a symbol of the collective determination to build a new South Africa. The culmination of these efforts was the historic election of April 1994, in which South Africans of all races were able to vote for the first time. The election was a resounding success, with the ANC winning a majority and Mandela becoming South Africa's first black president. The peaceful transfer of power marked the end of apartheid and the beginning of a new era. Mandela's election was not just a personal triumph, but a testament to the resilience and determination of millions of South Africans who had fought for freedom. Mandela's role as a negotiator was defined by his ability to hold together a fractious coalition of interests while remaining true to his principles of justice and equality. His leadership during this period demonstrated the importance of dialogue, compromise, and the capacity to envision a better future. By guiding South Africa through a peaceful transition, Mandela not only dismantled one of the world's most oppressive systems, but also set an example for the global community on the power of reconciliation and negotiation. Nelson Mandela's inauguration as South Africa's first democratically elected president on May 10, 1994, marked a triumphant moment for the nation and the world. However, the transition from apartheid to democracy was only the beginning of an immense challenge. South Africa faced deep racial divisions, economic inequality, and the lingering wounds of decades of institutionalized oppression. Mandela's presidency, 1994 to 1999, was characterized by his focus on reconciliation, nation-building, and laying the foundations for a more just and equitable society. This chapter explores his leadership during this transformative period and his efforts to unite a fractured nation. Mandela's vision for post-apartheid South Africa centered on reconciliation and inclusivity. He understood that the country's survival depended on fostering unity among its diverse racial and ethnic groups. Mandela rejected revenge and retribution, choosing instead to promote forgiveness and mutual understanding. His philosophy of reconciliation was rooted in his belief that a divided South Africa could never thrive, and that the only path forward was to heal the wounds of the past while addressing the systemic inequalities that apartheid had entrenched. One of Mandela's most significant initiatives to promote reconciliation was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, in 1995. Chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the TRC was tasked with uncovering the truth about human rights violations committed during apartheid and providing a platform for victims and perpetrators to share their experiences. Mandela believed that acknowledging past atrocities was essential for the country's healing, even if it meant confronting painful truths. The TRC embodied his commitment to restorative justice, prioritizing truth and accountability over punitive measures. While reconciliation was a central focus of Mandela's presidency, he also faced the daunting task of addressing South Africa's deep economic disparities. Under apartheid, the majority of Black South Africans had been systematically excluded from economic opportunities, resulting in widespread poverty and unemployment. Mandela's government introduced policies aimed at redistributing wealth and expanding access to education, healthcare, and housing. The Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP, sought to address these inequalities, though its implementation was met with significant challenges, including limited resources and bureaucratic obstacles. Mandela's leadership extended beyond policy initiatives to symbolic acts that underscored his commitment to unity. One of the most iconic moments of his presidency occurred during the 1995 Rugby World Cup, hosted by South Africa. Rugby, traditionally associated with the white Afrikaner community, had long been a symbol of division. Recognizing its potential to bridge racial divides, Mandela publicly supported the national team, the Springboks, and famously wore the team's jersey during the final match. When the Springboks won, Mandela's gesture of unity resonated deeply, becoming a powerful symbol of reconciliation. Mandela's leadership style was marked by humility, empathy, and a willingness to listen. He sought to build consensus and engage with diverse perspectives, earning him the respect of allies and opponents alike. His ability to connect with ordinary South Africans, regardless of their background, made him a unifying figure in a country still grappling with its divisions. Mandela's personal warmth and commitment to dialogue helped to foster a sense of hope and shared purpose during a time of uncertainty. Despite his many achievements, Mandela's presidency was not without its challenges. High levels of poverty, unemployment, and crime persisted, and some critics argued that his government did not move quickly enough to address economic disparities. Additionally, the HIV/AIDS epidemic emerged as a major crisis during his presidency, with limited government action in the early years. Mandela later acknowledged this shortcoming, advocating for greater awareness and intervention after leaving office. Mandela's decision to serve only one term as president reflected his commitment to democratic principles and his belief in the importance of institutional stability. By stepping down in 1999, he set a powerful example for future leaders, emphasizing that no individual should hold power indefinitely. His departure from the presidency did not mark the end of his influence, as he continued to play a significant role as a global statesman and advocate for peace and human rights. Mandela's presidency was a period of both triumph and challenge. While he could not resolve all of South Africa's issues during his time in office, he laid the foundations for a democratic and inclusive society. His leadership during this critical period demonstrated the importance of vision, courage, and empathy in addressing complex and deeply rooted problems. Mandela's ability to balance reconciliation with the pursuit of justice remains a model for leaders navigating post-conflict transitions. Ultimately, Mandela's presidency was not defined by the policies he implemented, but by the values he upheld. His unwavering commitment to unity, equality, and forgiveness helped to steer South Africa through one of the most challenging periods in its history. Mandela's ability to inspire hope and foster trust in a nation long divided by fear and hatred was his greatest achievement, solidifying his legacy as a leader who exemplified the transformative power of compassion and reconciliation. After stepping down as South Africa's president in 1999, Nelson Mandela transitioned from a national leader to a global statesman. While no longer in public office, his influence and moral authority continued to resonate worldwide. This chapter explores Mandela's post-presidency years, focusing on his advocacy for social justice, his commitment to peace building, and his role as a symbol of hope and resilience in the global community. Mandela's retirement from politics was far from a withdrawal from public life. Instead, he used his global stature to champion causes that aligned with his lifelong commitment to equality and human rights. One of his key initiatives was the establishment of the Nelson Mandela Foundation in 1999. The foundation became a platform for promoting dialogue, research, and programs aimed at addressing social justice issues such as poverty, education, and HIV/AIDS. Through this organization, Mandela sought to extend his legacy of service beyond South Africa's borders. The fight against HIV/AIDS became a central focus of Mandela's advocacy in his later years. During his presidency, the South African government was criticized for its inadequate response to the epidemic. Mandela acknowledged this shortfall and, in the years following his presidency, worked to raise awareness about the disease, reduce stigma, and promote access to treatment. His personal connection to the cause deepened after the loss of his son, Makatho, to AIDS-related complications in 2005. Mandela's willingness to speak openly about the issue helped to break taboos and inspire global action. Mandela also played a significant role in conflict resolution and peace building. Drawing on his own experiences of negotiation and reconciliation, he lent his expertise to mediating disputes and fostering dialogue in regions affected by conflict. Notably, he worked to promote peace in Burundi, serving as a mediator in the country's efforts to end a long-standing civil war. His involvement underscored his belief in the power of dialogue and his commitment to using his influence to bring about lasting change. Beyond specific initiatives, Mandela's presence on the world stage served as a powerful symbol of hope and resilience. He became a sought-after speaker and advocate, addressing issues ranging from racial discrimination to economic inequality. His speeches and public appearances reinforced his core messages of forgiveness, reconciliation, and the importance of collective action to address global challenges. Mandela's ability to connect with people across cultures and generations made him a unifying figure in a world often marked by division. In 2003, Mandela used his voice to criticize the Iraq War, calling it a violation of international law and questioning the motives of the nations involved. His willingness to speak out on controversial issues, even at the risk of alienating powerful allies, reflected his unwavering commitment to justice and truth. Mandela's moral clarity in addressing global political issues further cemented his reputation as a principled leader. As Mandela's health began to decline in the late 2000s, he gradually reduced his public appearances. However, his legacy continued to grow. In 2007, he co-founded the Elders, an independent group of global leaders dedicated to promoting peace, human rights, and sustainable development. Members of the Elders included figures such as Kofi Annan, Jimmy Carter, and Desmond Tutu, reflecting Mandela's belief in collective leadership and the importance of diverse perspectives in addressing global issues. Mandela's birthday, July 18th, was declared Nelson Mandela International Day by the United Nations in 2009. The annual observance encourages people worldwide to dedicate 67 minutes, representing the 67 years Mandela spent fighting for social justice, to community service and acts of kindness. Mandela Day embodies his belief that everyone has the power to contribute to positive change, no matter how small the act. Despite his global acclaim, Mandela remained deeply grounded in his values and personal relationships. He often spoke of the importance of family, community, and humility, emphasizing that his achievements were the result of collective efforts rather than individual heroism. This humility endeared him to people worldwide and reinforced his role as a leader who prioritized service over personal gain. Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. His death marked the end of an extraordinary life, but his legacy continues to inspire movements for justice, equality, and reconciliation around the world. Mandela's post-presidency years demonstrated that leadership extends beyond holding office. His ability to leverage his moral authority to address global challenges ensured that his impact would endure long after his passing. Nelson Mandela's life and leadership have left an indelible mark on South Africa and the world. His legacy extends far beyond his presidency or his role in ending apartheid. It encapsulates a profound commitment to justice, reconciliation, and the belief in the transformative power of human dignity. This chapter explores the enduring influence of Mandela's values, his impact on global movements for human rights, and the ways in which his example continues to inspire future generations. One of the most striking aspects of Mandela's legacy is his capacity for forgiveness and reconciliation. After decades of fighting against an oppressive regime, Mandela could have chosen a path of vengeance, but instead, he prioritized healing. His willingness to forgive those who had wronged him and his fellow South Africans became a foundational aspect of the nation-building process. His example of reconciliation, exemplified by his work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, has influenced global peace processes and continues to serve as a model for conflict resolution. Mandela's approach to leadership was grounded in his recognition of the importance of collective action. Throughout his life, he emphasized that his accomplishments were not achieved alone, but through the efforts of countless individuals and movements. His commitment to unity, both in South Africa and globally, remains a crucial part of his legacy. The idea that ordinary people can contribute to extraordinary change is one of Mandela's most enduring messages. His life continues to inspire activists and social movements around the world, reinforcing the idea that leadership is not about power, but about service to others. In South Africa, Mandela's influence on national identity and governance has been profound. As the first democratically elected president of the country, he symbolized the triumph of justice over oppression, and his presidency set the stage for the nation's transformation into a multiracial democracy. The Constitution of South Africa, adopted in 1996, enshrined many of the values Mandela championed: equality, human dignity, and the rule of law. His leadership during the critical years following apartheid not only prevented a descent into civil war, but also laid the groundwork for a new South Africa rooted in democratic ideals. Beyond the political sphere, Mandela's influence has permeated South African society in more personal ways. His commitment to education, the empowerment of women, and the eradication of poverty has inspired policies aimed at social transformation. While challenges remain, Mandela's focus on justice and his insistence that the country work together to build a better future continues to shape South Africa's trajectory. In particular, Mandela's vision for social and economic equality provides a moral compass for policymakers and citizens alike. On the global stage, Mandela's advocacy for human rights, peace, and social justice helped redefine the role of former leaders in the post-presidency years. Mandela used his position not only to address South Africa's domestic challenges, but also to advance global causes such as the fight against poverty, AIDS, and the promotion of human rights. His influence extended to the international community, where his voice was often sought on issues of racial injustice, conflict resolution, and global governance. His legacy as a global statesman is marked by his ability to transcend national boundaries and champion universal human rights. Mandela's impact on the global anti-apartheid movement is also a crucial element of his legacy. The Free Nelson Mandela campaign, which mobilized millions of people around the world, demonstrated the power of global solidarity in challenging injustice. The boycott of South African goods, the imposition of international sanctions, and the global protests helped isolate the apartheid regime and exert pressure on its leaders. Mandela's release and subsequent leadership of the anti-apartheid struggle became a rallying cry for activists across the world, and his name became synonymous with the broader fight for freedom and human rights. Mandela's role in the liberation movement continues to inspire leaders who face the challenge of transitioning from oppression to democracy. His ability to navigate difficult political landscapes, make strategic compromises, and remain steadfast in his principles has informed countless leaders in post-conflict societies. In particular, Mandela's success in managing South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy offers invaluable lessons for leaders who seek peaceful solutions to entrenched political and social divisions. While Mandela's legacy remains largely positive, it is also important to recognize the complexities and contradictions in his life. His decisions, particularly in relation to economic policy and his handling of the HIV/AIDS crisis, have been subjects of debate. Some critics argue that his government did not do enough to address poverty and unemployment, while others believe that his handling of the HIV/AIDS epidemic was inadequate. Acknowledging these critiques is important to understanding Mandela as a human being, with limitations and blind spots, rather than as a saintly figure. His legacy is not without flaws, but it is precisely in his humanity that his story becomes even more powerful, showing that even extraordinary individuals have their shortcomings. The global impact of Mandela's legacy can also be seen in the continued relevance of his ideals. As the world faces new challenges, such as rising inequality, ethnic and religious conflict, and the erosion of democratic values, Mandela's emphasis on human dignity, justice, and reconciliation remains a vital framework for addressing these issues. His belief in the power of nonviolence and dialogue serves as a guiding principle for peace builders and activists today. Mandela's vision of a world where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by their shared humanity is as urgent now as it was during the struggle against apartheid. In conclusion, Nelson Mandela's legacy is vast and multifaceted. It extends from his role as a freedom fighter and president to his status as a global advocate for justice and peace. His life offers invaluable lessons on the power of forgiveness, the importance of unity, and the transformative potential of collective action. Mandela's influence continues to shape not only South Africa, but also the broader global community, inspiring individuals and movements to fight for a more just, equitable, and compassionate world. His legacy is a testament to the enduring impact of a life lived with purpose, conviction, and a deep commitment to the dignity of all people. Nelson Mandela's life is a testament to the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit to endure and overcome adversity. From his humble beginnings in the rural village of Kunu to becoming a global icon for peace and justice, Mandela's journey encapsulates the power of resilience, conviction, and moral leadership. This final chapter reflects on the enduring significance of Mandela's life, the sacrifices he made for his beliefs, and how his legacy continues to shape the world today. Mandela's life was shaped by a deep commitment to his people's liberation and equality. Born in 1918 into the Thembu royal family, Mandela was immersed in the traditions of his people. Yet his exposure to the harsh realities of racial discrimination at an early age sparked a fire within him that would burn throughout his life. It was this early awareness of injustice that led him to pursue a career in law and eventually take up the mantle of activism. Despite his privileged background, Mandela never lost sight of the suffering and oppression faced by the majority of South Africans, which fueled his desire to change the country's political and social system. Mandela's involvement in the African National Congress, ANC, and the anti-apartheid movement was marked by strategic thinking and dedication to the cause. Early on, he recognized that the struggle for freedom would not be won easily, and that it would require sacrifice, perseverance, and unity. Mandela's decision to embrace nonviolent resistance, though later evolving to support armed struggle, showcased his willingness to take the most effective route to dismantle apartheid. His leadership was characterized by a balance of radical action and thoughtful diplomacy, which proved to be essential in confronting the complex realities of the apartheid regime. Perhaps the greatest sacrifice Mandela made was his 27 years in prison. For nearly 3 decades, he was separated from his family, his community, and his country. Yet, his imprisonment did not break his resolve. Rather, it strengthened his commitment to the cause. Mandela's time in prison became a symbol of resistance and endurance, galvanizing support for the anti-apartheid movement both within South Africa and globally. His ability to endure such hardship and maintain his ideological clarity during his imprisonment elevated him to the status of a symbol of freedom and hope. This period of sacrifice defined much of his character and in many ways shaped his leadership when he finally emerged from prison. The transition from prisoner to president was not without its challenges. Upon his release, Mandela faced the immense task of leading a deeply divided country into a new era. The process of reconciling the wounds of apartheid while building a democratic society required tremendous leadership, patience, and a willingness to compromise. Mandela's decision to prioritize reconciliation over retribution was a crucial element of his presidency. He understood that the survival of South Africa as a peaceful, multiracial democracy depended on building trust between historically antagonistic groups. His leadership was marked by a refusal to seek revenge, despite the immense suffering inflicted upon his people. Mandela's presidency was also characterized by his focus on addressing the country's deep social and economic inequalities. The legacy of apartheid had left millions of Black South Africans impoverished and excluded from access to basic services. Mandela's government took steps to address these disparities, although progress was slow and many challenges persisted. Mandela's commitment to the improvement of education, healthcare, and housing for the disadvantaged underscored his belief that true freedom could only be realized when all South Africans had equal access to opportunities and resources. Yet, he recognized that the process of building a new South Africa would take time and was not without setbacks. Mandela's legacy is also defined by his role as a global symbol of peace, reconciliation, and human dignity. After leaving the presidency, Mandela continued to advocate for global justice, focusing on issues such as poverty, HIV/AIDS, and conflict resolution. His influence was felt beyond South Africa, as he became a leading figure in global diplomacy, using his moral authority to speak out on behalf of the oppressed. Mandela's message of forgiveness and reconciliation resonated with leaders and activists worldwide, and his role in the global movement for human rights continues to inspire people fighting for justice and peace. The establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, was one of Mandela's most significant contributions to South Africa's post-apartheid transition. By providing a platform for victims and perpetrators of apartheid-era crimes to testify, the TRC allowed the country to confront its painful past in a constructive way. Mandela's insistence on creating a space for truth-telling, rather than retribution, laid the foundation for a more inclusive and just society. The TRC's emphasis on restorative justice, rather than punitive measures, was a pioneering approach that has influenced peace processes in other countries affected by conflict and authoritarian rule. Mandela's life is not only a story of triumph over oppression, but also one of personal growth and transformation. From the fiery young activist who advocated for armed resistance to the wise elder who championed peace and forgiveness, Mandela's journey illustrates the capacity of individuals to evolve in response to changing circumstances and deeper understanding. His ability to reconcile the personal pain of losing his youth, his family, and his freedom with the broader political struggle reflects the complexity of his character and his deep commitment to his ideals. He demonstrated that leadership is not about perfection, but about perseverance in the pursuit of justice. As Mandela aged, his health began to decline, but his presence remained as powerful as ever. In his later years, he reflected on his journey with humility, recognizing that the fight for justice was ongoing and that the new South Africa still had much work to do. His legacy became not just a national treasure, but a global beacon for those who sought justice, equality, and dignity. His death in 2013 marked the end of an era, but his values and teachings continue to live on through the work of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the global advocacy for human rights, and the many individuals whose lives he touched. Nelson Mandela's life was a remarkable testament to the power of resilience, vision, and unwavering dedication to the ideals of justice and equality. His leadership, sacrifices, and triumphs have shaped South Africa and the world in profound ways. Mandela's legacy transcends national borders, and his example continues to inspire individuals and movements striving for a better, more just world. His life reminds us that the pursuit of justice is often a long and arduous journey, but it is a journey worth taking, one that can ultimately bring about the transformation of societies and the betterment of humanity.